a couple of years ago, I think 2013 or 2012, this woman, Gigi Jordan, a multimillionaire mother in New York, murdered her 8-year-old autistic child who she was convinced was being abused by Satanists. Her narrative made no sense at all, being that she claimed that she stayed with the kid 24 hours a day, watched over the kid, and she hadn't witnessed these Satanists. But she felt that his autism was not actually autism at all. The child was nonverbal and had a great deal of difficulty with cognitive functions in general. But she felt that this was all a manifestation of trauma he suffered at the hands of abusive Satanists. Her theory was bolstered by this asshole named Frank Putnam, who tried to legitimize the facilitated communication that was done with the child. And I'm not sure if you're aware of facilitated communication, but it's kind of like the Ouija board effect. The child would have his hands over a keyboard, and she would actually type out the messages for him, and it's supposed to be based on some type of muscle reading. But when they've done tests on facilitated communication, they found that if the subject who's supposed to be doing the actual typing is seeing a message and is supposed to be reporting on it, and the person who's guiding doesn't see it, it ends up gibberish, or if that person doesn't have a marker for it. So, and this was affirmed in court. Third parties said that it was quite obvious that while the child was looking away, she was typing for him. But Frank Putnam went worse. He was even talking about the amazing communications the child had without even mentioning this intermediary process of facilitated communication. What's interesting about Frank Putnam is he's very defensive of the dissociative identity disorder diagnosis, and he's part of an organization, the primary organization that still promotes the idea of dissociative identity disorder today, the ISSTD, the International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation. This prick, Bessel van der Kolk, was willing to testify. The court wouldn't take his testimony, probably because it was full of shit, but he was willing to say that that trauma, sexual trauma, can manifest itself in ways that look like autism. And what's interesting also about him is his strong ties to the ISSTD. And Gigi Jordan was obviously a disturbed woman. You can see court documents where people, there was actually an emergency shelter hearing for her child when she went to the FBI and tried to report these Satanists. And I think money got her out of that because she was a multimillionaire. But they reported that they felt she was mentally unstable and put her in for emergency psychiatric evaluation. The next day, they had the emergency shelter hearing, and what was interesting is the court felt that, they obviously felt that there was a danger to the child, but it didn't really meet the standards, the burden of proof of taking the child away from her. Something the press never caught on to is that Gigi Jordan did consult a therapist while she was under these delusions, and a therapist may have been in the best position to disabuse her of her paranoid delusions of persecution. She went to Ellen Lachter instead. And I think Ellen Lachter is possibly every bit responsible for that child being killed, and she was never called out for it, never investigated, and idiots like her are still licensed to this day. So I can't go to these conferences anymore. I'm infamous. Other people go to these conferences in my place. One of them is Sarah Ponto Rivera, and she was recently at the International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation conference, and I'm going to let her describe for you some of the problems from there.
Thank you. All right, so the ISSTD is full of fucking assholes, and I say this with sincere gesture because each and every one of them goes to these conferences, takes information that is based in pseudoscience and conspiracy theory, and then comes back to their hometown to share that with their patients. Now, each and every one of us has a loved one or someone that we know in our community who is mentally ill, or has experienced some type of mental ailment at least once in their life. And could you imagine going to someone like Ellen Lachter, who harbors these kinds of delusions? So when I went to the ISSTD conference, I was really shocked at the idea they presented so professionally. You know, there was long white tables of literature, everybody was professional and friendly, but only a little bit of scrutiny when you actually read the titles of the books. They are conspiracy theories, and that is very unsettling to me, that the ISSTD claims that they are a comprehensive, clinically effective, and empirically based resource. But as you can see, this is from their website. They have a special interest group based in ritual abuse and mind control that that many people believe this idea of the satanic panic was only strictly to the 80s and 90s, but obviously this is an example that is currently here today. So the ISSTD president, Lynette Dowell, she wrote a paper in 1992 at the height of the mental health malpractices with satanic panic themes, and it was titled Treating Ritual Abuse, and it was specifically for mental health professionals and the frontline people to inform them about the traumas that satanic cults can give. Now, she rebranded her narrative, which is significantly the theme that the ISSTD does whenever their practices are deemed dangerous for their patients. They rebrand like a business who's been stained. So now the ISSTD has a new name, and they use new terminology. So instead of MPD, which it was debunked 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it's now dissociative identity disorder. Instead of having repressed memories, now it's dissociated memories. And their methodologies have no scientific basis at all. So Lynette Dowell is the current ISSTD president, and her 1992 paper, Treating Ritual Abuse, was republished in 2013. And with the title, Treating Trauma Survivors, she admitted the words ritual abuse, cults, and dissociation. To rebrand, she didn't want that public eye to see her actual intent. Now, this can only spread misinformation to other mental health professionals. If she is just appropriating her information from the satanic panic days, how can that be giving accurate information to other mental health professionals? And she's a fucking president of an organization. So, just to give you a couple examples, so from her 1992 paper, it's very easy and very common for therapists working with ritual abuse survivors to see their clients in a one-down position in the doctor-patient medical model. All right, 2013. It's very easy and very common for therapists working with abuse survivors for the therapist to fall into a traditional medical model. So essentially the same thing, omitting ritual. Many clients hate their bodies for feeling so much pain and hate themselves for their perpetuation in rituals. Many clients hate their bodies for feeling so much pain and hate themselves for any stimulation their body felt during their abuse. Now, I get really fucking emotional about this, so I'm really sorry, because when I went there, I attended this conference with 300 mental health professionals, 300 from all over the world. And they're going and getting this information and bringing it back and putting it into programs that are in our communities, treating people who've been actually abused, and then they're getting this misinformation to promote their narrative of satanic panic. So Sue Baker is a course director within the ISSTD, and I unfortunately sat through her presentation, which was extremely taxing, and she was a really great example of how the ISSTD rebrands. And this is a quote from her presentation. We can't use the word dissociation. She's talking about in her course about complex trauma. We can't use the word dissociation. So there she's already saying that people are dissociating when they have trauma. she's already identified that we don't believe that people can just be traumatized. We believe that they have to have DID, which is the A plus B equals C conjecture. It's all right, you've been sexually abused, you have dissociative identity disorder. So we can't use the word dissociation because, first of all, it's going to chase away those people who already have the mindset against dissociation. The course is called The Introduction to Complex Trauma. So we use complex trauma knowing that down the road you lead people into the dissociative field and the way to think about that. So the same techniques that are being used, that were used in the Satanic Panic, that led people to be fucking imprisoned falsely, that put kids into, subjected children to mental rape by their therapist, and those practices are still being used today, just rebranded, as Sue Baker has so blatantly explained. This asshole is Colin Ross, and I have a lot to say about him, but you should Google him and read some of the really fucking terrible things that he's done to people. He relocated from Canada to, I can speculate that he was trying to avoid several lawsuits against patients. When one of his victims is Roma Hart, and she states that while she was under his care for 4 years, at least 12 people had died. So they either committed suicide, I believe possibly overdosed. I'm not exactly sure on that, but that really sets a precedent for his medical model and his ethics. So
and rape for reasons unknown. He let a sex offender wander the woman's ward.
Yeah, if you didn't hear that, he let a sex offender wander the women's ward without any supervision, and sexually attacked Roma Hart. So he wrote a book, and in his book, which I'm currently reading, he says, "I have met many demons, devils, evil characters, representatives of Satan, and Satan himself in my NPD work." So when I sat through his presentation at the ISSTD conference, he explained that he's created a questionnaire to help mental health professionals diagnose dissociative identity disorder. And he says, he claims that this disorder has no basis in scientific evidence, and he's correct. And so he thinks that he is bringing reliability and validity through the DDIS to the dissociative disorder field. So he stated, I did the DDIS. The DDIS is just a supplement to your clinical practice and gives you the ability to say, well, I did the DDIS, therefore I'm not a flaky person, and therefore you can't criticize me. So rebranding. He's fucking rebranding, just like I demonstrated. So trying to evade any type of skepticism or criticism. And in the DDIS, these are 2 questions that he has. He says, have you ever had any contact with a ghost, poltergeist, spirit of any kind? That's a question that a therapist is supposed to ask a patient to help you identify if they have multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder. Have you ever been involved in cult activities? Now, he's not asking these questions to identify the mental state of the person. Are they having delusions? He literally believes that there are ghosts, poltergeists, or that people are in actual cults. Now, he's been spreading misinformation since his career started, essentially. This is an excerpt from a documentary from Canada, The Fifth Estate. It's something very similar to like 60 Minutes. And he had published a paper stating that 1 in 100 people have multiple personality disorder. 1 in 100. He published that, put it out into into mainstream journals, and people were quoting this. There was a huge burst of MPD patients within the 90s because of his paper. And the journalist who was on this, she like catches him in his fuck up because there's no way that there's 1 in 100 MPD patients. And he even admits it, but then takes no responsibility for it. So I'll play this little snippet for you.
Ballpark-wise, it appears to be about 1% of the general population, making it about as common as schizophrenia or manic depressive illness.
But which ballpark are we in, if we're ballparking?
It's not 1 in 10,000. It's definitely more common than 1 in 1,000. It's probably somewhere in between 1 out of 50 and 1 out of 500, almost for sure.
Okay. Someone should not be ballparking statistical data. If you are a researcher, and especially the psychiatric field, you don't fucking ballpark, especially on something as broad as this.
But that number is out there now. I mean, people are quoting this study as proof that it's 1 in 100, and now you're saying you're not sure of that.
Well, that's people who are overconfident about the accuracy of the figure.
So this study had clout and really bursted this disorder, and I feel confident to say that this is a disorder that has solely been induced by therapy, and a lot of these therapists have a career treating multiple personality disorder, and they're not actually treating the presenting symptoms appropriately. And then they're using research from people like Colin Ross to back up their medical model. Seabram Fisher. She gave an 8-hour presentation over a technique called neurofeedback. Now, if you have never heard of neurofeedback, it is essentially an EKG or an EEG, and it's like little electrodes that get stuck to your scalp and supposedly help you retrain your brain. But there is no data to support this at all, and so I'm sitting with probably as many people as there are here, and sitting through 8 hours of this presentation over junk therapeutic technique, and she says that this is a technique that she treats DID patients with, MPD patients, and she claimed that it's effective. And so many of the mental health professionals, were in awe, like, wow, this is something that can really help us out to actually get these patients better, which I don't know if any of you know much about this disorder, but it's very common that MPD patients only get worse within therapy. That's almost always the case. They get worse, and there's no overcoming this from unless they break away from the therapy. So one of the mental health professionals in the audience asked her, well, how do you bill for this? How does this technique get paid for? And this is what she explained.
No, so I bill on. I think this is. Stop recording. I bill psychotherapy code, and I really, even though I don't want that on the record, the only reason is I just don't want the hassle. I think I could easily prove. I am also doing psychotherapy, and I'm doing it while people are training, and I can have Soji, Carolyn, and a number of other people can come to my trial, right? Because, and they can talk about what psychotherapy and what psychotherapy with neurofeedback did. Yep. So,
within your psychotherapy coded session, you'll do this background?
Well, there's a code for biofeedback assisted psychotherapy, which no insurance company acknowledges, but there is such a code. And it's, you know, and I have other people, you know, who get much faster results. So it's not like saying, I'm just talking about this really severely, that they don't have it takes a while to make a right hemisphere. You know, it really takes a while to do that. And that's really essentially what we're doing. So, yeah. Now do I have to say start recording? Yeah. You can start recording.
If you didn't understand what she was saying, she just admitted to insurance fraud and then abetted it to her audience. So I filed a complaint to her licensing board in Massachusetts and was very thorough about it and got a response. Sorry, I don't know how to use PC computers. So this was the letter that she received back, that I received as well, stating that they dismissed the complaint and that she was just getting a letter to not commit fraud anymore. So, yeah, exactly.
Stop that.
Exactly. This is the same licensing board that, as Doug was talking about, Neal Brick. Neal Brick also practices in Massachusetts.
I'm Doug.
What did I just call you?
You called me Doug. Yeah, you called me Doug. A lot of people don't.
Lucien. Oh, Lucien. Lucien Greaves. Sorry.
Nobody knows.
Yeah, so Neal Brick, who believes that he is a CIA super soldier and that I believe pretty much any conspiracy theory, kind of like take a little trickle of it and you got Neal Brick. He believes that these things have happened to him. So he also is a licensed mental health counselor. He counsels people, okay? And he believes this. Now, he also admitted that he had raped and murdered while in a conference to supposed victims of ritual abuse. He admitted that while in an altered state of mind, which he believed was another personality of his that he raped and murdered. Now, I obviously don't believe that he did these things for where his mental state is. So a complaint was filed through one of our Grey Faction members and to his licensing board, and they dismissed the complaint without any prejudice. Now, this really gets to me because who is supposed to regulate? Who is supposed to protect the patients? Now, many can claim well, he didn't actually harm anybody, so that's probably why the board dismissed it. But I just want to share the email that I responded to the licensing board about his dismissal, pointing out several laws that are against what he did exactly. And I'll just share a couple bits because it was pretty lengthy. To the Board of Allied Mental Health, customers of mental health care have a right to be treated by a competent licensed mental health counselor. It is the duty of the Board of Allied Mental Health to hold high standards in assessing competence of a licensed mental health counselor. It has come to my attention that after 1 year of deliberating on a case against Neal Brick, the Board of Registered Allied Mental Health and Human Service Professionals made a decision to dismiss the case and concluded it did not, and I quote, did not support a claim under the laws and regulations governing licensed mental health counselors. This decision has brought up several ethical questions that deserve to be promptly addressed. Under General Law Part 1, Section 165 stated that an applicant shall provide satisfactory evidence to the board that such applicant is of good moral character. Yet Brick has made statements that one of his self-proclaimed alter personalities has committed rape and murder. Does the Board of Registration of Allied Mental Health and Human Service Professionals not find statements of rape and murder committed by a licensed mental health counselor, such as Brick, to be a violation of ethical standards of such nature as to render such individual unfit to practice as a mental health and human service professional? That was a quote. As it states in the General Law Part 1, Section 169, Is it not concerning or worthy of prejudice that the board that Brick believes he has in the past raped and murdered people in a ritualized manner? If the board does not find it to be a violation of the ACA's Code of Ethics, does the board align itself with Brick's personal conspiracy theory perspectives of satanic ritual abuse and mind control? Brick also asserts that he was a former assassin of the Illuminati and committed rape and murder. The question this raises regarding Brick's own mental health status and how he can be declared fit to offer mental health service to clients cannot be ignored. Further inspection by the board is ethically appropriate and a more thorough public explanation for the concluding dismissal of this case is requested. It would be a disservice to the public, as well as to Neal Brick's current and potential clients, for the Board of Registration of Allied Mental Health and Human Service Professionals to allow these questions and requests to go unaddressed. Well, they responded and pretty much said, well, I'll read you a little bit of what they said. After a thorough review of this matter, the board determined that there was no evidence that the respondent violated the rules and regulation that govern the practice, despite me just pointing out, I mean, I pointed out 4, okay, and there was more. But, so who is there to protect from these conspiracy theories and satanic panic ideas that are harbored in mental health professionals? Who is, if a licensing board, this is just 2 cases of a licensing board not performing a duty, a service to their potential mental health consumers, how can we know that a mental health professional, people who we love, or people of our community, how do we know that they aren't going to get services from people such as this? Now, I just want to close on Allison Miller. She wrote this book, Healing the Unimaginable, Treating Ritual Abuse and Mind Control.
Oh.
Now, you would think that this would be a book that would have been at the hype of the satanic panic in the 80s and 90s. However, this book was published in 2013. And so she draws from Colin Ross, which we talked about, Ellen Lachter, even Neal Brick. She even quotes Neal Brick, the CIA super soldier, and goes on about the ISSTD and about how they are a reputable organization. And she also discussed many very dubious topics, such that the military uses mind control to implant dissociative identity disorder, and that they use children to force them to use building blocks and other types of blocks to create walls, and then they superimpose them into the child's mind. And this is a mental health professional. She actually treats children, and I think that it is something that we need to not forget about, and continue pressing the APA to rid the mental health community of people like this, and ideas such as this. It is a belief system that has no basis, and is very much like a religion, and also an assault on women's rights. Mostly women are impacted by the NPD or DID diagnosis, and if we ignore this as a women's rights issue, then we are gravely harming those women who might be potential mental health care consumers. So, thank you.
Sarah's first presentation. Sorry if that wasn't as light and as humorous as some of you might have expected, but I think it's kind of obvious how this plays in with the Satanic Temple, and it was one of the original things I really wanted to take on with the Satanic Temple, was fighting the witch hunters on terms they would never expect to be confronted on. And something I'm hoping to do with some of these conferences is network with people who can help us achieve those goals. And Sarah is our point person for the Grey Faction within the Satanic Temple, where we're trying to devise ways to destroy the careers of people like Ellen Lachter and destroy organizations like the ISSTD. If you want to talk to us about anything, we'll be around, we'll be circulating, and I'll be willing to answer any questions. And if you have any any thoughts on this, let's talk tactic. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question as Jesus and also a social scientist. So I know a lot of clinical psychologists, they're good friends of mine, and they would be happy to help you out. So I guess I can talk to you afterwards, but have you reached out to other therapists? They have to be, some of them have to be understood.
Well, what we find, I think, is a lot of people are afraid. A lot of people aren't willing to be disparaged as Satanists or pedophiles. Obviously, I'm willing to be called a Satanist, but pedophile is actionable. But what they do with me is it's not really actionable when they say that whether I choose, whether I'm consciously doing it or not, that I'm defending pedophiles. So you look me up as Doug Mesner, you'll find a lot of bullshit online about how I defend pedophilic abuse, because that could only be the true agenda behind calling into question the idea of dissociative identity disorder. And it's amazing what clout this fringe conspiracy movement has on just being the people willing to go that low below the belt, you know. And a lot of professionals aren't willing to put their names on it, but they might be willing to get behind us, you know. So if you put them our way and give them some type of anonymity, the Satanic Temple has always been one of those organizations willing to take the bad press and look like the bad guys while getting shit done.
But wouldn't they even want to know about that and other therapists to protect themselves? So even outside of the work that you guys are doing, bring it to their attention. Wouldn't they want to be like, screw these people, they're hurting, not helping? Like, I don't understand why they wouldn't jump on that.
Well, definitely putting themselves out there and took a lot of heat for it, but I think that there's only so much that you can do, but until it gets a little old and exhausting.
Part of the problem too, though, is people still like to believe that this is a done deal. Mm-hmm. They ignored the ISTD connection to the Gigi Jordan case entirely. They took a case where a mother killed her 8-year-old kid and ignored the fact that she had gone to a therapist who was selling her these delusions. And I think it makes people comfortable to believe that there was this exact time frame in which the Satanic Panic took place, and now it's over. But that's just not the case, and that's something we're working on, bringing to light. It's a difficult fight to get involved in, so if you can tell yourself that things are progressively getting better, even when they're not, it's an easy out in ignoring the harm that's being done.
So it seems to me like would y'all be interested in maybe like creating some sort of extra certification, like evidence-based mental health services, like that people actually have to reach a higher bar of... They have that.
It's within their standards, and that was something that was reported in her complaint against Neal Brick. You're supposed to go on based on the best empirical evidence, but we're just not having any luck on making the licensing boards hold to those standards. I mean, there is no empirical evidence for DID, and in fact, there's nothing but evidence against it. The problem is that there's no unifying theory of mind, so that right now with the DSM, you just have a list of symptoms. You know, to have a disorder, you just have to have enough people agree on a list of symptoms, and they'll say that this is proof of the disorder. That's as much of the proof of the disorder as we can have, so that will suffice. And the DSM is very political. It's very politicized, and people like to have diagnoses put in there for reasons that go well beyond the well-being of the clients. And in fact, an interesting book is Making Us Crazy. I think it was about the formation of the DSM. And what was really interesting is the question of homosexuality. That was treated as a mental disorder for the longest time, and then it was very politicized. There was protests, there was the gay rights movement, and it wasn't a mental disorder anymore. And that's a good thing, and usually people just think, well, that's a good thing. But what they don't see is that it was never a question of science. It was only a question of convincing the right people. It was a question of there being protesters. It was a question of the culture swaying another way. So there's still a very, there's still a very definite problem there when you're not dealing with empirical evidence, when it's just a politicized issue. And what you don't see with the APA is them making any nods towards progress in cognitive science. They're not looking at the research psychologists' work half the time. They're still sticking to this model where there's symptoms, and it doesn't even matter if you can see that there's definite harm being done with DID. They're just a spineless organization. They're worthless. Even the, what was it, the National Health Organization is going to give up on the DSM and try to develop something else because it's entirely unreliable. But we'll be happy if the APA falls out of favor with absolutely everybody, and they should for this reason.
To what extent do you think this belief in ritual abuse and mind control is being fueled by the therapist's own religious or spiritual beliefs, that somehow maybe a belief in that there are, Satanists out there kind of supports their own belief in God or higher powers, or does it seem to be unconnected?
I think it was significantly more in the 80s and 90s, but it's definitely, it's definitely going on today. The ISSTD president, she got her first degree in theology, and so there are a lot who are pushing their own religious agenda. But I sat at a ritual abuse and mind control luncheon at the conference and talked to one Valerie Sinison. She's extremely disgusting, and she claims that she is an atheist, but believes that there are satanic groups who are plotting and trying to take over the world. So I don't know necessarily if I can.
Well, something I didn't mention, which I probably should have, and I don't think she did either, was that at these conferences, like even the SMART conference I went to, there was a woman there. She had to have been about 40 years old, and she was claiming that she had been a mind control subject of Dr. Joseph Mengele, and that he was using what she called demonic harmonics to open up quantum portals in which I think demons were coming through or whatever.
Wow.
And she was,
I want to see that.
Yeah, and she was working this all into an anti-abortion argument. I mean, this was unhinged stuff. And they have the tinfoil hats on sale. They're not exactly tinfoil, but the same premise. These conferences are offering continuing education units to licensed therapists. And Ellen Lachter, who I pointed out earlier, she runs, in the ISSTD is ostensibly this respectable professional organization just dealing with dissociative disorders. Ellen Lachter, the woman I was telling you about, who I feel is at least partially responsible for the murder of the 8-year-old autistic kid, she's the head of their ritual abuse task force or something like that. So she is taken seriously within the ISSTD, as were these other characters I was talking about. And you just go to her website, I believe it's endritualabuse.com or .us or something like that. But she speaks very openly about this belief in the Illuminati and the satanic cults that are out to destroy us all and that type of thing. And I mean, your original question was about how the religious motivations behind this. Of course, that underlies everything, but they tried to secularize the argument. I think there's a lot of supernatural presumptions, though. You see that kind of cognitive dissonance when Geraldo was doing his Satanism special. He was talking about whether you believe in Satan or not, Satanism exists. So he was trying to put this secular spin on it, but yet underlying the presumptions of all the speakers within that show and everything he was saying, that to identify with Satanism could only mean one thing. And to me, that's a supernatural supposition. Because we get that sometimes too as the Satanic Temple, people saying that no matter what we think we're doing, or what values we think we're forwarding, we're bringing evil into the world. And that's a supernaturalist mindset, and I think part of the power of what we're doing is shaking that up in people's minds, hopefully forcing people to judge us for our activities and what our actual values are, rather than our fealty to symbolic norms.
All right, well, all hail the Satanic Temple.